Hello, everybody. This is Purdy Horbach, and welcome to our webinar, Single Access Point to All Your Content Services. I see something has dropped up. Good start. Thank you all for joining us. This webinar will take about, I guess, 45 minutes. If you have any questions, please use the chat box you can fill out on the GoToWebinar dashboard. I now hand it over to Rickert Engels. He is our CEO and founder of the company, and he will present to you this webinar today. So, Rickert.
Thank you, Purdy. Yes, so I have around 17 years of experience in content management. Prior to starting Xillio, I already had 4 years of enterprise content management experience at the ABN AMRO. We started as a migration services company, and back in 2014, we transformed from a services company into a software company, utilizing our decade years of experience in doing migrations and utilizing our experience with all kind of different content repositories. So what is our vision, and what we have experienced? What we see is that lots of documents in an organization are spread in several silos. As a user, you want to see a project document. You want to see a personal file, you want to see a sales report, etc. But all are spread in different systems. It's spread in Office 365. It is spread in Alfresco. It's spread in Salesforce. These are basically just the examples. But as an end user, you actually just want to have the file, and it is very, very difficult to get the content out of these repositories and to actually connect them with each other. So what we have developed is a solution that acts as an integration layer towards these different repositories, with basically two main intentions. One is to get the content out, to basically almost like free it from its content repository, and the second objective is to make it simple to actually talk to all these different repositories. What we see nowadays is, especially with digital transformation programs, is that these programs are so incredibly complex that in certain cases it can take up to a year before a program actually even starts, because of the amount of repositories, the amount of business process that are linked to it, the technical difficulty, etc., etc. So what we are aiming is that we have an integration layer that frees the content from its source, so you can use it for other purposes, and that integration layer provides a simplicity to your very, very complex digital transformation program. So if I take it further, so we are in the middle, and then you have an application that you can then use for integration. You can use it for translation. You can use it for search. That does not really matter. The fundamental point is that we provide that integration layer on top of all your repositories, and with that get the documents out in an easy and simple way, so that you can use those documents for further processing, whether that is then a migration or an integration. It does not really matter. So what is our vision? Our vision is we provide you with one access point and one data model to all your underlying content repositories. And this vision also gave us the Cool Vendor Award from Gartner a couple of weeks ago. And of course, we are very pleased with that nomination. So the unified data model, of the one data model as we call it, is an extremely important element of our roadmap and of our offering. And so let me dive into that here. So if you look at the evolution of content connectivity, it started with simple file exchange. Then we moved on to email FTP. Then we developed APIs like just web services or REST APIs or SOAP connectors, etc. then the industry was kind of like tried to determine a new standard to kind of deal with all the different uh, small differences between the different APIs of all the different content repositories and determine a standard called CMIS. Now, that CMIS is a very, very good thought behind it. But unfortunately, as we know, as previous migration party extremely well, each system that complies to CMIS actually even has their own version of CMIS. So Alfresco has CMIS, Nuxeo has CMIS, but both are not the same. Those are two different, we call it the Alfresco version of CMIS and the Nuxeo version of CMIS. So it's a good intention to actually create a standard, but still not all repositories joined. And secondly, the repositories that actually did join still have their own naming conventions and small differences between the actual standard. So then there were other vendors that stepped into that hole. Vendors like Anthropisoft or Phonetica that developed one API, and then with that one API, you had one API for all the underlying repositories. Now, as far as I know, I don't think there is. I know that Anthropisoft and Phonetica provided it, but both are sold and no longer on the market space. As far as I know, I don't think there is a company right now that actually provides one API, but I'm not 100% sure about it. But we brought it one level further. So what we have also done, we have included one unified data model in this one API. And this one unified data model is then the foundation for content reuse and content interoperability between the different content repositories. So let me elaborate on that unified data model a little bit more. What is a unified data model? Basically, what it is in real simple terms, it is our own terminology how we store the metadata of a content item. So here is just a very simple example of a file with its source, its current, its parent, the file created date, the modified date, the MIME type, etc., etc. So this is a set of standards that we have created that acts underwater as our standard, and all our connectors are linked to this unified data model. It could act, of course, as a corporate taxonomy for your organization, but that's not how it's meant to be. It is meant as a standard taxonomy for our own purpose, so that we have a standard to which we apply and allows clients to map towards. So our standard doesn't determine the industry standard. It is just the way to make sure that all our connectors talk the same language and become as such interoperable. And so all the connectors that we are developing for integration purposes, or all connectors that we are developing for our migration purposes, always link to this unified data model, and as such are instantly working, and as such provide one standard that they become that they actually become exchangeable. So to go a little bit more into that unified data model and how it actually works, to explain the working of that, we have on the left side we have a source, on the right side we have a target, we have a standard unified data model, and we have a standard connector that talks to the standard data fields of that unified data model. So if we pull out a connector basically without any modification on it, it provides the standard fields that are standard decorators, as we call them, in our unified data model. So the extraction connectors work out of the box, and the connectors towards the target system also work out of the box. And then with source and target systems, you have to think about it's more the logical candidates like SharePoint. Of course, we have connectors to Box, Dropbox, OpenText, Documentum, Sitecore, Adobe, SDL, Drupal, OpenText, Alfresco, Nuxeo, etc., etc. So they talk to our unified data model, and then to provide the custom mapping for each client, because each client, of course, has a different data model. Then we try to map the differences that in that specific client case towards the unified data model. So you might have called something a creation date, and we have called it a different item. So then we map that naming towards the creation date. But it also allows to include custom decorators within the unified data model, so that if things are not part of the standard, it can be created in a custom way. And then it also allows to enhance, of course, the metadata. So the unified data model typically covers 80% of the data model. So if you have an out-of-the-box connector just to access information, it works out of the box because you don't want all the different metadata fields. If you do a migration, you typically lack 20%, and you have to adjust the connector to provide the additional 20%. And those custom decorators then also provide the possibility to enhance, of course, the metadata with business rules, classification, deduplication, etc., etc. You can these services that I mentioned here are just examples. Any service, of course, can run on a unified data model, which is again a massive difference of massive advantage, because all that service runs on the same data model, so you only need to configure it once. To actually apply those rules. And the real benefit is not in the migration of the integration of one source. The real benefit, of course, is if you integrate or migrate several sources. We have done projects in the past where we did a migration of 855 different sources from 19 different source repositories. So you can imagine those were 855 different naming conventions that needed to be migrated into one source. So we needed the concept of a unified data model to normalize the different data models to get it into a standardized way into the target environment. But it also applies not only for 855. The added value, of course, comes already if you have more than 3 actually already, because then the mapping and the exceptions, etc., are already extremely complicated. So that unified data model really acts as the glue to get it into the target. Typically, what we see is that it gets out of more systems into one. But of course, the unified data model can also apply its value if you import it into more than one system. If you look at content services and the way Gartner has described it, then I cannot agree more with the vision that Gartner has emphasized here, introducing content services. And only from a migration point of view, with our experience, I can fully embrace it. I see the business benefits, of course, as well. But just from a practical point of view, the amount of content repositories that organizations have are so immense that it nearly becomes impossible to get it all into one content repository. Even though I understand the reasons why it's very desirable, it is simply not achievable. I can give a simple example. There was a project at Moody's, a client of us in America, that was I think delayed for almost a year before it could even start because of program difficulties. The project of 855 systems that was migrating into SharePoint, which was at the Dutch ministry, I think they stopped at 12 because they were still in 2016 migrating to SharePoint 2013, which doesn't make, of course, any sense. And we have several. We have a lot of examples of those cases. So this is also the main reason we actually started with the creation of the integration layer back in 2014, because we saw this coming. It was simply not doable for organizations anymore to migrate into one single repository, and it would be a lot better to migrate what you want and to integrate the rest. Allow several repositories to stay, and just use the repository for what it's best at, and work in a multi-repository world. It doesn't mean you leave everything intact, but instead of that client that went from 855 to 1, if they would have picked 4 repositories, one for collaboration, one for sync, for the file share and sync, one for the archiving, and one for more kind of one for more like compliance purposes. It would have been a lot easier. And so we saw this coming. That was the main reason why we started with the development back in 2014 with the integration layer. So we fully embrace this new content services diagram of Gartner, and we see it happening because the digital transformation program becomes a lot easier and a lot more feasible if you start dealing with multiple repositories and don't try everything into one, or at least not be forced to get everything into one repository, but allow that. So where does Xillio play a role in this? We are only this. We are just that integration layer. We are just that connector. We do not provide a repository, we do not provide an application, and we do not provide components. Of course, we can include components in our framework. We have connectors into several services like translation. We have connectors into application. We have connectors into repositories. But we are just that integration layer. And within that integration layer, we have one unique feature, and that is again that one data model. So that integration layer is basically that one API, and the unified data model in the middle is then the glue that holds everything together. So our integration also goes through the UDM, so it doesn't go directly from the repository into the application, but it goes through the UDM. So just a few examples of what we see the integration layer is used the most for. Of course, with our migration background, it's really used for migrate what you want and integrate the rest. So you have 20 repositories, just bring it down to 3 or 4, yeah, and start living in that you have four repositories. Or another way is that you migrate what you want, but you basically integrate the functionality of the source application for a while you are developing the new functionality in your target application. This is what we see really a lot. And I call that feature, it skipped a sprint. Because basically what it means is that you do not have to have full functionality in your target application in order to profit from the business benefits of it. So let's say you have a very complicated workflow and archival process in a source application like Documentum, and you rebuild a new content, you build a new, more modern content architecture based on Office 365, for instance. Then to rebuild that functionality of Documentum with all its approvals and with all its workflows in Office 365 is a very, very time-consuming endeavor. And with us, if you start using our integration layer, it is not needed. You can choose whether to migrate. You can choose whether you want to phase it out, but already expose the functionality while you are migrating, or you can leave it as an integration for basically until you find the time or until Office 365 provides the functionality that you can replace the old functionality in an easier way. So it provides you with a lot of flexibility and options to simplify your digital transformation project. Now, we come to the second example that we see a lot, is that this file share and sync solutions like Box and Dropbox and Ignite, etc., they act as a central access point to your on-premise content repositories. So we see more and more that end users, they of course love the easy usage of a Box and a Dropbox and an Ignite application on a mobile device, and if you integrate it through Xillio with the on-premise content repositories like SharePoint on-prem, it provides for a very easy access through. So you profit from both instances. You have the UI from Box and Dropbox, while you can leave the functionality and the complexity at the on-premise content repository. Third example is that you use the unified data model as an entry point yourself for improved search, for improved reporting, and for improved governance. As I mentioned, it basically is an underwater language, making sure that all content repositories basically start talking the same language. So if you have reporting on it, you actually have one version of the truth, and then you map your terminology onto our terminology, and you have one clear overview. Uh, Fourth use case is the development of a mobile app on top of a legacy repository. Same here. So let's say you are an insurance company. You want to provide a mobile application that people can see their own contract. Your contract is in a legacy application, which is extremely difficult to build a mobile application on top of it. We can expose that document from the legacy repository and expose that API through the mobile app that you want to develop, and you don't need to deal with it anymore. We basically free the content from its repository, so you can use it in whatever purpose you want. And the last one, which is a very very interesting one we have developed together with our partner SDL, is the integration of translation, which is straight from the source repository. So I have a slide of that. So basically, what this means, this is the SDL managed translation site, and it allows you with a drag and drop functionality to link automatically your Adobe Experience Manager, your Confluence, your GitHub, your Library, Marketo, SharePoint, and Zendesk. So you can automatically link to those repositories. You select the document that you want to translate. It runs through the SDL Managed Translation service, and the document comes back, and it's automatically stored at the right spot within Adobe Experience Manager, Confluence, etc., etc. Which, of course, adds a tremendous value, both in user friendliness as in the correct storage of the translated documents. So these are just a couple of use cases. So this is all the functionality that we have now. So, and now we are moving towards what are we working on? So what is next? So what's our vision of where the market is going, and where is our product going? If you take a digital transformation program, what we see is that it is extremely complex to manage the program. Why is it so complex? In our view, it is very, very complex because of technical constraints and the complexity of the architecture. It's basically, in most cases, it becomes a spaghetti architecture, which makes it very complex. And it is technically very difficult because your content is locked away in your repository. And we aim to solve those two items. We aim to solve it because we free the content from its repository so it can flow freely between the different repositories. And secondly, that integration layer becomes the central access point. And as such, you have a N-to-one, one-to-N relationship instead of N-to-N relationships. Now, we solve integration both internal in the organization and external in the organization, or more on the workplace experience with the enterprise content management and the file share and sync space, and in the customer experience side. And what we are seeing more and more in the market is that those two environments are more and more intertwined. I think a very interesting observation in this is actually that the diagram I showed earlier about content services is also written by the lead analyst from Gartner in Enterprise File Share and Sync, in Web Content Management, and in Enterprise Content Management. So they also see that those three old worlds are, which were historically more divided, are getting more integrated. And what we see within those in those two worlds is that, of course, in the digital workplace, you see the applications, platforms, and the components. So the big trend is into a multi-repository world. And within the digital transformation, what I see coming, which is not there yet, but where I see the market is going, is that it really becomes a customer lifetime journey. We are all about customer experience, but it becomes a customer lifetime journey because the customer doesn't care if he is in the pre-purchase, so in the marketing phase, if it's in the purchase or in the commerce phase, or is in the post-purchase or in the after-sale phase. He just wants to be served with the right content. And right now, those three path in the customer lifetime, you could almost see that the circle at the bottom is more like a straight line. It's more like a timeline. Is really divided, which then leads to a non-consistent user experience. And I think that is the next phase where the customer experience market is heading towards, that it really becomes a customer lifetime experience. And of course, Xillio is then playing a role as the glue in the middle, connecting all these different content repositories. And what we are striving towards, and where we see the market is not here yet, but what we are seeing where it really gets to is that at the end of the day, there will be several applications, several categories like campaign management or marketing resource management or translation, digital asset management, e-commerce, customer relation management, business process management, etc., etc., etc. At the end of the day, it's just content within a repository that needs to serve a purpose. That content will be freed through integration layers. We are striving to be the market leader and the thought leader in that integration layer. And it's not even content anymore, it becomes a content element. And that content element becomes interoperable between different phases. So it allows for reuse of content elements. And our unified data model is actually also made for that, because of course it has the data structure underneath that allows then for content elements to become interoperable. So, but this is future. We are working hard towards that. The market's not there yet either, but this is what we are working on. Now a little bit about Xillio. As said in the first few minutes already, we started in 2004. We started as migration services. We've been named a cool vendor in content services 2017. We currently employ 40 people and growing very, very fast. Clients, we have clients all over the world. Based on our specific expertise in migrations. For the last 12 years, we have done extremely high-profile clients like Moody's, Harvard, Willis. We have a long relationship with Capgemini. Capgemini has even installed a migration factory in India supporting worldwide migrations. So certain activities of the transformation process can be outsourced. And of course, we have clients who are more in the software vendor space, like SDL, that use our connector framework, almost like an OEM partnership, where they just reuse the connectors for their offering. This was the last slide. If you have any questions, I would welcome them and happy to answer.
Oh, sorry. Need to go back. Well, thank you, Rickert, for this update. Let me see if I can, open this. So, any questions, use the chat box. So there's a question here, Rickert. I see somebody's asking what you mean by a content element.
Yeah, so what I mean with that is that right now we are really talking about pages. We're talking about files. We still kind of think in those elements, and I think that it really gets much more into elements, and elements than, for instance, a description of an article or an intro of an article. So, and it allows you then to reuse those different a paragraph, for instance. A paragraph can be an element. It allows you to reuse those specific parts of a content page.
Okay. Thank you. That makes sense. Any other questions? Not for now. So, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. You can call. You can send any questions to webinar@xillio.com. I will make sure you receive this presentation by tomorrow. And well, thank you all for joining. Great to see we had so many people join us today, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you.